Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. With free weekly content and free shipping over $100, you can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. I'm also sponsored by Face to Face Games, Canada's premier Magic the Gathering store. Using the promo code MTGMudsta will get you 5% off site-wide, with eligible orders getting free shipping Canada-wide. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is another one filmed in my studio space, and you're in luck. We filmed Opening Hands after so many of you requested it. Max is playing Araumi, Keeping an Island, Manamo School at Water's Edge, Fabled Passage, Crucible of Worlds, Aven Heartstabber, Mindstone, and Victimize. I am rocking my Shorikai deck, keeping Dermotaxi, Exotic Orchard, Inventor's Fair, the Black Staff of Waterdeep, Nautiloid Ship, an Island, and March of Swirling Mist. Felix is playing his Ludevic and Tevesh Szat deck, keeping a Victimize, Skullclamp, Fire Diamond, Mountain, Shadowblood Ridge, Swamp, and Bajuka Bog. Last but not least, Seb has made Jodah Dragons, keeping a Lathless Dragon Queen, Swamp, Overgrown Tomb, Sarkhan the Mad, Fabro Elder, Simic Signet, and Sarkhan Unbroken. Max wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Fabled Passage, cracking it for a Swamp. I play an Island and cast the Black Staff of Waterdeep. Felix draws and plays a Mountain and casts Skullclamp. Seb just plays a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Max draws and plays an Island, tapping 2 for a Mindstone. I play a Skycloud Expanse, passing. Felix draws and plays a Shadowblood Ridge, and then casts a Talisman of Creativity. Seb has a Forest for turn, and casts Simic Signet, passing after that. Max plays a Drowned Catacomb for turn, and then casts an Aven Heartstabber. He passes after that. My turn is quick as I draw and play an Exotic Orchard. Felix draws and plays an Izzet Signet, and then casts half of his commanders with Ludevic before passing. Seb draws, playing a Temple Garden for turn, and taking 2 so it comes in untapped. He then casts a Fabro Elder, and passes. Max draws, and plays a Verdant Catacomb, cracking it to find a Sunken Hollow. He then casts Araumi, and goes to combat. He pokes Seb for 1 with the Heartstabber. Max gets to draw a card off the Ludevic trigger, and passes to me. I play a Plains and cast a Shorikai on curve. Felix plays a Swamp for turn, and then casts his other commander, Tevesh Szat, and then upticks him to make some Thralls. Once that's done, he passes. Seb has a Swamp for turn as well, and plays a Soul Ring. He goes to combat, swinging the Fabro Elder at me and dealing 2. He moves to his end step, which lets him draw a card from Ludevic, and he passes after that. Max plays a Crucible of Worlds after drawing for turn, and then plays and cracks a Fabled Passage out of his graveyard, going to find a Swamp. Moving to combat, he pokes Seb for another 1 with the Heartstabber, drawing a card in his end step from Ludevic, and then passes. I draw and play an Inventor's Fair. I cast Mindling Mech and pass after that. Felix plays a Mountain for turn, and then pays 1 to clamp a Thrall, drawing 2 cards. He then casts an Act of Treason and targets Araumi. Max responds by countering it with a counterspell, and once that's done, Felix upticks Tevesh Szat for more Thralls. Going to combat, Felix swings Ludevic at me, dealing 1, and then clamps another Thrall in his second main phase. He then finishes things up by drawing a card at the end of turn from his Ludevic trigger and passing after that. Seb draws and plays a Windswept Heath, cracking it and going to find a Stomping Grounds, taking a total of 3. He then has enough mana to cast Jodah, and then taps the Fabro Elder for 5 mana, which he uses to help pay for lurking predators. He passes after that. Max once more draws, and then plays and cracks the Fabled Passage from his graveyard to find an island. He then sacrifices the Mind Stone to draw a card, before playing Vor, which has Seb revealing a Gruul Signet and bottoming it. Max then follows up with the Swiftfoot Boots. This triggers Seb's Lurking Predators, who gets to put a Bloom Tender into play. Moving to combat, Max then pokes Seb for 1 with the Heartstabber, drawing from Ludevic, and passes after that. While I decide to draw as well, activating Shorikai to draw 2, discard 1, and make a pilot. I draw and play Mech Hanger. I then cast a Thran Dynamo and crew up the Mindlink Mech with my pilot, and go to combat. I go at Tevesh Szat to keep him away from his ultimate range, and pass after that. Felix draws and plays an Evolving Wilds. He cracks it for an island. He then upticks Tevesh Szat again for more Thralls, and puts to stack a Mass Polymorph. This triggers Seb's Lurking Predators, and he gets to put a Scourge of Valkis into play, which as it enters, pings a Thrall for 1. In response to the Mass Polymorph, I then cast a March of Swirling Mists to phase out 3 of Felix's Thralls, and the Polymorph then resolves. This has him exiling Ludevic, which he sends to the command zone, and he doesn't have to reveal very deep as he hits a Massacre Worm off the top. This wipes out all the small creatures and deals some damage, and with that done, Felix passes. Seb draws and casts Lathless in his main phase, which triggers Jodah, flipping him into Rith, Liberated Primeval. The 2 dragons then deal 2 damage and then 3 damage off the Scourge of Valkis triggers, both of which go at Tevesh Szat. Seb then follows up by tapping the Fabro Elder to help cast Vevictus Asmadi the Dire, which triggers Jodah again. This has Seb revealing until he hits Ramnari off the Jodah trigger, and Lathless triggers as well, making another dragon token. He has the damage from the Scourge take out the Massacre Worm, and then hits Max for 7 with the second one. Vevictus then enters, making another token, and Seb has 2 more additional Scourge triggers, hitting Max and I for 7 apiece. Going to combat, Seb then swings Jodah at Max, and the Scourge at me. Max jumps with Araumi, while I take the hit to the face. After all that, Seb moves to his end step, making a dragon token from Rith, which deals 8 damage to Felix from the Scourge trigger. Max draws, and once more plays and cracks the Fabled Passage from his graveyard, and this time finds an island. He then casts a Lotus Petal, and follows up with a Mystic Remora, passing after that. During his end step, I activate Shorikai to draw 2, discard 1, and make a pilot. I draw and play an island. I then put to stack a Day of Judgment to deal with the dragons. Lurking Predators flips into a Nicol Bolas off the top, which makes a dragon from Lathless, and both of the Scourge triggers blast me down to 4 life total. I then play Katori Pilot Prodigy and crew up Shorikai, going to combat. I get my Katori trigger, putting Lifelink and Vigilance onto Shorikai, and then smack Seb for 8 and gain 8. Felix's Thralls phase back in, and he draws. He then plays a Swamp, and casts an Exalted Flamer of Tzich. He follows that by upticking Tevesh to make more Thralls, and then clamps one of them. After that, he passes. Seb draws, and once more recasts Jodah, but with nothing else, passes. Max opts not to pay for the Mystic Remora cumulative upkeep cost, and draws for turn. He plays Manamo, and then recasts Araumi. And once she's out, equips her with the boots. After that, he passes, and once more I activate Shorikai on his end step to draw 2, discard 1, and make a pilot. I draw and cast SRAM, which flips a Balefire Dragon off the lurking predators on Seb's side. I then cast a Nautiloid Ship, which flips into Niv Mizzet Reborn off the lurking predators as well. Seb gets to resolve his Niv Mizzet trigger entering the battlefield, and keeps 2 of the 10 cards he reveals. The Nautiloid Ship then comes in, and I exile Seb's graveyard with a ship. I then cast a Smuggler's Copter, which this time gives Seb Nicol Bolas the Ravager, making us all discard a card as it enters. Once more I then crew up Shorikai and go to combat, giving Shorikai the trigger so it has lifelink and vigilance, and I string it at Felix. He blocks with a Thrall, and I gain 8 life, and I pass after that. Felix gets his Act of Treason back from the Exalted Flamer trigger, and draws. He plays an island, and casts Demise, sacrificing a Thrall for an Overseer of the Damned and a Massacre Worm, and dealing 1 to each of his opponents with the Exalted Flamer trigger. The worm eats a bunch of small creatures again, and the Overseer kills the Balefire Dragon. As a result, Felix gets 2 2/2 zombie tokens from the Overseer triggers, and then casts Act of Treason to take Jodah. This once more triggers lurking predators, and flips Seb into a Dragonlord's Servant. Going to combat, Felix then smacks Max with Jodah for 6, and then sacrifices it after combat to Tevesh Szat's ability to draw 3. Following that, Felix casts a Polymorph on a token, and flips into Raphael Fiend's Savior. He then moves to his end step, getting to make a 1/1 Devil token from the Raphael trigger. Seb draws and plays a Flooded Strand, and then casts a Dragon Tempest. He cracks the Flooded Strand to go and find a Plains, before casting Beledros Witherbloom. Max responds to this dangerous dragon by countering it with a Disallow, which triggers the lurking predators, and flips Seb into a Morophon. The Dragon Tempest then deals 4 to me, and Seb follows it up with Silumgar Drifting Death, dealing another 5 to me. Going to combat, Seb swings Niv Mizzet and Ojutai at me, and Nicol Bolas and Silumgar into Tevesh. Ojutai's trigger taps down Shorikai, Raphael, and the Overseer of the Damned, and the Massacre Worm. With the targets on the stack though, I respond by activating Shorikai. I then use the new pilot to crew up the Nautiloid ship before the Silumgar trigger kills it. I then chump Niv Mizzet with the ship, and then use Dispatch to take out Ojutai. I still take 2 from the Massacre Worm though for my token dying, but survive the combat at least, and Tevesh Szat dies. After that, Seb passes, and Felix makes a Devil off Raphael. Max draws and casts a Plaguecrafter, which kills me thanks to the Massacre Worm trigger after I sacrifice a creature. Everyone sacrifices a creature as well, and Max and Seb take 2 off the Massacre Worm as well. While Felix sacrifices a Devil token and gets to ping Seb for another 1. Max then casts a Noxious Gearhulk, destroying the Massacre Worm and gaining 6. After that, Max passes, with Felix making a Devil token. Once more in his upkeep, Felix gets back the Act of Treason from the Flamer trigger, and then draws. He plays a Bajuka Bog, exiling Max's graveyard, and then casts Brainstorm, dealing 1 to everyone, and gaining 2 thanks to Raphael giving the Flamer lifelink. He then replays Tevesh Szat, and casts the Act of Treason, this time on Niv Mizzet, dealing another 1 to everyone, and gaining 2 more. Felix then moves to combat and swings Niv Mizzet at Seb for 6. After that, Felix then sacrifices Niv to Tevesh Szat, drawing 2 and passing. Seb draws and casts a Primal Surge. With his whole deck being permanents except for the Surge, he flips all of his dragons into play and gets to blast the table to death with Dragon Tempest for the win. Game review time. So this was one of the first times that I saw Jodah the Unifier, and I know a lot of people have been giving him a hard time because he's so good. I like the direction that Seb took it in, although it seems like he basically just changed his Dragon deck or Golos deck into this, but he focused more on legendary dragons than just generic good ones. It's a shame no one was able to find some removal for that Lurking Predators, because he got a ton of value out of it. Max's Araumi of the Dead Tide deck typically does a lot better than this one, and it seemed like he was missing a lot of his mill cards. Even once he had his commander out and a bit of a graveyard, he seemed to lack some critical targets to be able to really apply pressure to the board. My Shorikai deck was doing a little bit better, although my opening hand probably could have benefited from some faster mana. I've since added some of the Warhammer 40,000 vehicles, and I've played them in other games, and let me tell you, they're very good. Felix's Ludevic and Tevesh Szat deck is a polymorph deck if you hadn't guessed it. I think he was probably pretty decently set up to win the game if he'd been able to resolve that mass polymorph without us disrupting it as much as we did. I like the randomness of polymorph, although typically people build it so that you only hit good creatures, which I feel is probably the case in this game. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.